there, everyone. Welcome to my NBP MaskLogic overview for portraits. Now, this is a little bit more complicated than the general one, and if you haven't seen that video, please do. But when I say complicated, that's what I want to kind of get out of the way up front. Please hear me out. I know I say this on a lot of my videos, but I know that while we're looking on YouTube or the internet in general, looking for ways to make our editing life better and get better results, we run into a lot of things, and a lot of people promise a lot of quick fixes and automatic things, and that's cool, but some fundamental core methods and techniques that retouchers have been using and still use to this day, especially in the professional retouching space, is so powerful. And it's definitely something that I want you to listen and work with me here. Like I said, step by step, I want to show you what this does. Now, I've repeated some of this in the previous video that we did the general mask situation with, but I'm going to go over it from the ground up with the portrait situation. So I've got a portrait here, which is edited, but it doesn't have any color work or any kind of tweaks on it. You know what I mean? I think I did a little bit in Capture One, but then I did a little bit of skin work on Jessica and called it done. Now, this is usually where I might end up using various compound masks for refining or mastering my image, but these masks can also be used for lots of different things, including corrective things, whether it's color or luminosity changes or whatever. Building compound masks is very, very important for lots of very, very specific things. However, there's so many different ways you can use them. It's hard to just quantify it like, here are the 7 things you need to use compound masking methods for. No, it's pretty much open-ended. Now, the way NBP MaskLogic works is we create all of the key masks that we may want to use or add to or subtract or intersect to create all kinds of really cool selections that allow us to do things that are really, really powerful in ways that maybe we didn't consider. But we let Photoshop and of course the functions that I've put into the actions do all the work up front. Then we have a bank of masks, and that's where we're going to start today. If you don't have your channels window open, go to window menu, channels. A lot of times channels is tucked in over here with layers in the path, at least for a lot of people. I don't know where you've moved your windows around, so I can't say. But if you don't have channels open, window, channels. When you get it open, the top right little menu option on channels, go down here, click it, and then go down here to panel options. I want you to choose the largest thumbnail and hit OK. Why? Because when we're first getting used to using channels for mask creation, we want to see the thumbnails a little clearer so we can get a better visual of what these masks might look like. Later, you can change that size back to normal if you want, or turn it off completely. Or if you're really flowing along, you may not even need the channels window open, depending on how you're using the helper actions, which we will go over. So for now, I want you to do that. Make nice big thumbnails and keep channels ideally in its own window so you can access it immediately alongside layers. Yeah, you can have it tucked away as a, one of these little tabs. That's fine. Whatever's comfortable for you. I just want to make sure that we have our channels easily accessible. Now, the first thing that we do, we're going to run this action here, NBP Portrait Mask Bank. It is a bank of masks that it's going to create and keep them as multiple channels. Now, this is fairly common. When we're building masks and we might need a mask repeatedly, we might build it and save it to a channel. That way we can call it instantly at any point in our workflow. So I thought to myself, well, I do this so often. And sometimes I've created what I call zombie actions, actions that do a quick function that's only for me, that only work in certain scenarios. And if I sent them to someone else, they probably had no use for it, or it'd be confusing. And I took a lot of my zombie actions over the years, and I put them together, and I created some new ones, accounting for Adobe's AI for selections. And I created a bank of masks that's going to create up front when you run the action. And then you can call these channels to make instant selections, whether we're adding to a selection, using it as is, we're subtracting from it, or we're intersecting it, which is the really, really interesting part, because we see a lot of that, especially right now in November 2025. Capture One has really started to incorporate in phenomenal functions when it comes to their masking and selection, so masking in their case. And we have this beautiful way of adding and subtracting and intersecting masks. So powerful. So let's go ahead and run it and walk you through everything. So we go NBP Portrait Mask Bank. The first thing it's going to say, if any warning dialogues pop up saying something was not found, or duplicate not available, or no more than 50% is visible, just hit continue each time. The way the action is set up is in a modular kind of way. So if something isn't possible, like it doesn't find the sky, which is an AI function of Adobe, if it doesn't find the sky, it'll give you a pop-up saying, hey, cannot be found, or duplicate not available, whatever it's going to say. Just hit continue every time. The end result will be a bank of masks set up as individual channels that could be created from your image. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward, because on my images and about a 5-year-old MacBook Pro, and the resolution I have 16-bit, it's taking me about a minute. I'm going to fast forward through it. If it does pop up any dialogues, I'll pause for that and show you, and show you how we can just hit continue. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so right now it says duplicate is not available, which means some kind of Adobe AI function did not find something or other. It could be maybe a hat or the lips or something like that. I don't know, but just hit continue and let it keep going. All right, now it's done. Let's look at all these channels that have been created, okay? These can be used, for, gosh, so many different things. It's very difficult. I've been thinking about this video for a while, because I'm like, I could show things for like 6 hours. There's so many things to do. But let's look at the masks that were created. Now, by the way, when I said earlier on that pause that maybe it couldn't find a hat, that's true. It couldn't find a hat. So no channel exists of a hat. It doesn't create an error. It doesn't create a blank channel. It just skips it. So just hit continue and move on. If it doesn't find eyes, like have sunglasses on, okay, fine. It just hit continue. Hit continue once or twice or 3 or 4 times. It'll create the necessary channels that it can find. Let's review them. All right, now since most of these on Portrait are going to be based on Adobe's AI, we have to understand that sometimes Adobe's AI can completely train wreck. It can pick, the skin and then a huge chunk of a fire hydrant for some reason. Who knows what happens with the AI? However, it gets better every month, really, just about. And it's been really, really powerful. So powerful enough that I've hinged an action set around it. So let's look at the first one, skin mask. This is Adobe's AI creating a skin mask. They're usually pretty solid, requiring very minimal editing, okay? So if we let's look at this one real quick. We have a line right here. Go back to the move tool. We have a line right here on the skin mask that's missing, right? So we can go ahead and mask that out. We can clean it now if we want, just with a white paintbrush. We can fix it on that channel, because remember, these channels are just pixel data. We can do anything we want with it. This isn't proprietary to NBP. It's just channel data, right? So let's see. We have the skin mask. We have the subject mask, which obviously is everything except the background. We have the background mask, which is the inverse of that. The mouth mask, especially on a headshot like this, could be very useful to us, right? We have the eyes mask, also useful on a headshot. We have the hair mask. Now, the hair mask is interesting because usually it's going to be really, really clean compared to another accident. Let me explain that. Adobe, if it's going to make a mistake on a skin mask, it'll usually include the hair when you don't ask it to. It just depends on the shot. In this case, the shot of Jessica is very clear. The hair is very obvious. But if you do find that the hair has moved in to the skin mask, for some reason on Adobe's AI, you can use the hair mask to clean up the skin mask. It doesn't happen right now. Now, wardrobe, here it got messed up. It got the straps of her outfit. Okay, but for some reason, that fur has just thrown off Adobe's AI. Unfortunately, the wardrobe and accessories mask is not going to be that useful to us right now. However, in the nature of this shot, the outfit's a little bit abstract. I mean, it could be a blanket around her. That's not a huge crisis, but that's another aspect of Adobe. Now we have the sky mask, which Adobe interpreted as being the background. Cool, that's fine, but not a big deal because it's a studio shot. And then we have the mask that I create, which is the saturation mask, which is a true chroma saturation, so you don't have luminosity data muddling up. A highlight mask, which can be modified if you need it, a midtones mask, and a shadows mask. Now, like I mentioned before in the other videos, all these masks sitting in channels, how does that help us? Well, we can call on any of them instantly. Okay, a couple of different ways, and we're going to go over those ways right now. And then we're going to talk about how to modify and intersect these to create really, really cool selections that can do cool things for us, okay? So for example, we're going to change her hair color in a minute in a supernatural way. Okay, not supernatural, but a natural way that's supernatural way. Okay, bear with me here. So real basic here. I say we, but retouchers have put together selections in channels to house them in there in a repository of masks so we can keep it in case we need it repeatedly, or if we know we're going to need it repeatedly. So a lot of times if I'm working on a really, really refined edit and there's some things that I know I want to do, I might create the skin mask using Adobe AI, and then I'll house it into a channel so I can call it instantly. Because frankly, using the Adobe AI every single time you want to select the skin in a workflow is slow. you know, it's going to take 15, 20, 30 seconds to select the skin every single time. Now, if you make significant changes and you need AI to be rerun, that's different, to like change the shape. But overall, I want this mask available to me. So what can we do with all these channels available to us? Well, let's remind ourselves how masks work. White means that's going to select that. If we make this into a mask, that means we're selecting the skin, okay? And by the way, let's look real quick here. We have the shoulder right there, which we're going to go ahead and allow. That'll be fine. I'll leave that there. Okay, white means select or show everything. Black means nothing. And then, of course, grays are in between, which is why, like the sky masks, for example, tend to have a little bit of a halo, because the way Adobe's AI works on sky is that it understands that skies usually have a bit of a glowing quality to them. So they kind of blend into the perimeter. That can be useful even in studio shots, but not useful here. I'm not worried about it, okay? But we have subject, we have the background, we have the mouth. What do we do with all this stuff? Well, let's say we're back to our RGB channel and we think, hey, you know what? I want to change the contrast of the skin. Cool. Now, when we have our channels open and we're looking at all the different channels thumbnails, right? Remember I told you to make them larger so we can see them easier. Command or Control, hold down Command or Control, click on the thumbnail of any channel. You see how when I push the button, that little icon changes on the hand to a little square, little capture box. We hold down Command or Control. We click the thumbnail of skin mask. Boom. Now we have that selected. That's like Adobe running a AI skin selection instantly. Cool. We have that selection running. Many things we can do. But one of the key things we can do is, for example, go to brightness and contrast. And now, because that selection was running and we went to brightness and contrast adjustment layer, it applies that selection as a mask. Standard Photoshop 101. Hold down Option or Alt, click the mask so we can look at it so we can see we've applied that skin mask directly to our brightness and contrast adjustment layer. Naturally, if we change the contrast, we change the contrast of our skin only. Obviously, the color's all jacked up, but more standard Photoshop stuff here. We can change it to luminosity blend mode. And there we go. We can add contrast. We can darken, a little less contrast maybe, and we make some changes to our skin. See how fast that is? That's the whole point. And then right now, if we really, really want to, we can also Command or Control, let's say, the background. Now we have the background selected. We can go to curves and we can darken the background. We can brighten the background. Okay, within limits, obviously. If you go too much, you might start having some issues, right? But for general modifications, who knows what we can do? Now, setting up an adjustment layer from a selection is just one of the things that we can do with a selection. But by creating these two quick masks, I quickly can modify the background and the contrast of her skin, going from this to this instantly. And instead of rerunning select subject and then inversing it for the background, or rerunning skin tone selection or skin selection in general, we have those available to us. So we can quickly hold down Command or Control again. We have the mouth. Boom. And then we can go to curves. Just an example. We can darken or brighten the lips any way we want. I'm exaggerating. This is not necessarily a good result, but I just want to show you how fast that is to create a quick selection and then keep rolling with it, right? And then the saturation, highlights, midtones, and shadows are also very, very useful as well. Let's say we want to add saturation to the image, but we don't want to just add it blindly, right? Especially with skin tones, right? Hold down Command or Control, click our saturation mask. Saturation masks, for the most part, are going to have, they're not going to show a lot of bright white areas. This one sort of does because of the specular highlights on the lips and eyes, but saturation masks don't tend to show a lot of strong brights. And because of that, Photoshop may kick back, hey, you just chose a selection, but I can't show it to you with the marching ants because it's less than 50% visible. Don't worry about that. If that dialog comes up, we cannot turn that off. That's just Photoshop. Just hit OK, knowing that you have the selection running. So if I go to Vibrance now, boom, it's going to apply. Hold down Alt or Option to click. It's going to apply a saturation mask to the entire image. So now, if I boost saturation really high, and just do some Vibrance just for demo. It's a little strong, but just for demo. Off and on, off and on. Now that's not beautiful, it's too strong, but you see we're only adding saturation in the saturated areas. That's pretty common. If you've seen saturation mask before, you know that's pretty common. So we can click, Command or Control click any of these channels to create an immediate mask. How cool is that? Well, on the action set over here, we also have that ready to go, especially the big four, which is saturation, highlights, midtones, and shadows. So I can click saturation and I have that mask ready to go, or rather the selection. Highlights, midtones, shadows. Immediately have these available to us whenever I need them, and I can do anything with them. Keep in mind too, we choose a selection, or we run one of these to get a channel as a selection, and then we can add an adjustment layer Let's go ahead and add curves, and then that creates an immediate mask. Pretty straightforward, but so is, for example, let's say I go to curves and I darken and I change to luminosity blend mode, and then I invert that mask so you can't see the effect. You can't see the effect at all, right? Cool. And while I'm on that mask, I can come and choose shadow selection. Now the shadow selection is running. So while that's running, it's protecting where I can paint. So if I hit Command or Control H to temporarily hide the marching ants, Command or Control H also brings them back. They're always on, but you're just hiding them is what you're doing, right? So now you can take a white paintbrush and we're darkening the shadows, right? So I can paint only, I'm going to overdo it, I can paint only in the shadows. See that? Now, if I did that with a flow, you know, and a little more care, who knows how you can add contrast just exactly where you want. Command or Control H to bring back the selection that's hidden. You can work with that selection. Here again, Command or Control D to deselect it. This is just Photoshop functionality, but the ability to pull any of these masks whenever you want them is step one in NBP MaskLogic. You have these buttons to create them whenever you need, especially these big four, right? But you also can create these light blue right here. You can create any of these channels independently if you don't feel you want or need all of them. You can just create a skin channel and a highlights channel, knowing you're going to work with the highlights of the skin, and then you can mix and match. And it's that adding and subtracting and intersecting really where things get exciting. Let's talk about the simplest way to create an added or an additional kind of mask. Okay, we can build a double mask. So for example, let's say we hold down Command or Control and click skin mask. We have the skin. We think, I want the hair as well. Okay, cool. Hold down Command and Control and Shift. Command and Control and Shift, and click now the hair mask channel. Now we've added that. Okay, so we come here to curves, just another example. Our mask, yeah, you have that line in the middle. Often it's not going to be a big deal, but if it's becoming a big deal for you, you can just clean it up manually in the mask. But as you can see, we did an addition. We created a skin and hair mask just by clicking on the channels. That's the fastest way we can do an addition. It's also a fast way that we can do a subtraction. So if I hold down Command or Control and I click subject, now I have the whole subject. Now I hold Command or Control and then also hold Option or Alt. Okay, so on a Mac, I'm holding Option and Command. On a PC, you'll be holding Alt and Control. That's subtract. Now I click the hair mask. Now I've got the subject minus the hair. That's everything on the subject except the hair, right? You see how that's a subtraction now. So if I again go to curves, now I have everything except the hair. These fringes are going to happen pretty normally because the masks don't always line up because they're AI based, but usually they don't cause too much of a problem. That just comes from experience, okay? Unless you're making radical changes, like making someone green or something, these fringes don't cause too much of a problem. But again, with black on your mask, you can clean up that fringe in 2 seconds and just keep working. That's not a big deal. And now we can brighten and darken everything except the hair. Now, I'm making these changes too strong just to show you what's possible and how clean the masks actually are. So again, as a reminder, Command or Control, click any channel and you've made a mask, a selection of that, excuse me. Hold down Command or Control and Shift and you can add to it. So there's the hair. Let's go ahead and add the mouth and the eyes. Done. See how easy that is, right? Control or Command D to deselect that. Now, if I hold Command and click, let's say I click the subject, right? Hold down Command or Control and then Option or Alt at the same time for subtract, and I can subtract the mouth and the eyes from the subject selection. Okay, you see how that's working there? Again, we'll put out a curve just to show, and there it is. So that is adding and subtracting, which for the most part works really, really well. Okay. Now, again, I'm exaggerating these functions just so you can see. Now, keep in mind to, be logical about it. Okay. So if you choose Command skin and then you go Option Command or Alt Control hair, then it's not going to function too well. You see how it's just not liking that? If I click it, nothing actually happens because there's no overlap. Okay. Because you're removing something that's not selected. Okay. So it doesn't make sense. You're like, you don't want the hair. Well, the hair isn't selected. So you might think what's happening. Okay, but if you hold down Shift and Command or Control, you can add the hair. Does that make sense? And this is also cumulative. So if I hold down Shift and Command or Control again and choose Subject, now I've got all of it. Then I can hold down Command or Control, Alt or Option and remove the skin mask. Now I've got the hair and everything else. I've got the hair and everything else except the face and the eyes. And you see where this is going. You can build that back and forth. Adding and subtracting is pretty straightforward, but there's also another way to do it. Or actually there are many ways to do it, I should say. But the more interesting masks that people enjoy building are the intersect masks, because those can have a lot of control that maybe you didn't even realize was possible. Intersecting mask is super, super hugely useful. And I'm going to explain kind of a direct way to do it. Then we're going to do an advanced way. And then we're going to talk about the NBP MaskLogic helper actions that you can install, okay, to do these intersections pretty fast. In fact, instantly, okay? So let's talk about what an intersection is, all right? One of the fastest way to do an intersection without damaging the channels themselves, which we'll talk about in a second. One of the fastest way we can do it is start with something. Let's say we want to do an intersection, and usually, I'll be honest, most of the intersections are going to be a body part, as it were, whether it's the mouth, eyes, hair, whatever, and then a range like saturation mask, highlights, midtones, or shadows. So that's usually what we do, but there's so many other things you can do. So let's say I want the skin, but I only want the highlights of the skin. Okay, that's an intersection. So how do we do that? We hold down Command or Control, click the skin. This is just one way to do it. Now, let's say I do a curve, excuse me. Now, oops, sorry, wrong button there. Cool, just had the quick mask showing up. So I've got the mask of curves. And if I brighten or darken, I'm brightening or darkening the whole skin. Cool. Well, how do I intersect it? Well, one way to do it is to group that, Command or Control G, group that layer itself. Then hold down Command or Control and click the highlights. And then that group, we add a mask to it. In the layers window, we add mask. So now we have a curves layer only on the skin, right? But it's been grouped into a mask that's only on the highlights. So when I brighten or darken now, that compound mask is in effect. I'm only brightening the skin and then further filtering that into just the highlights. That is very, very non-destructive because I have two masks that I can modify independently to create that compound effect. In fact, let's do another one. We'll go skin mask. We'll put curves out. And just to make it look better, I'm going to put on luminosity blending mode. And then I'm going to choose, let's say, the shadows, group it, add mask. Now, when I darken, I'm only darkening the shadows. And if I brighten, I'm only brightening the shadows. Again, I'm doing it too much. These are not supposed to be great results. But if you wanted more contrast on the shadows of the skin, look how fast that was to add some depth to the skin, right? And I can just close that out and leave it there. And I can come back and choose skin mask again instead of running the AI again. Put curves, and then this time choose the highlights, group it, add a mask, and now I've got highlight control. See how much contrast I'm adding? Just with these two little group folders. And that's cool, don't get me wrong. That can be very, very useful. In fact, I've made videos about this before. A stack like this where you have layers, it can be one or many, inside the folder, having some kind of limitation with a mask, and then the folder itself having a mask. That compound masking, incredibly useful. And when you get to, it's kind of hard to explain when to use it because there's no hard and fast rule, but sometimes when you want to create a really detailed mask that you may use for something very specific, but you know you need a very accurate mask and you want flexibility, that's a great way to do it. And it works really, really well with any of these, okay? You can just stack and go from there. But keep in mind logical as well, okay? So if I go, for example, if I choose eyes and then I choose curves, well, I can brighten and darken the eyes. That's cool. But then if I come here and I choose mouth and then I group it and make a mask of that, well, now I've nullified everything because I can only brighten and darken the eyes, but then I'm further masking it to just the mouth. You see what I'm saying? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, you know, if you find yourself like not seeing a result, you may have crossed the streams for my Ghostbusters reference on this mask stacking, this compound masking that may have messed you up. So right now, just a reminder, our wardrobe mask is kind of useless. We're going to leave that alone. In fact, I'm going to delete it by hitting the trash button and saying yes, because that's going to be important to demonstrate in just a minute. Because deleting these masks, these channels, is a pain in the butt. I don't know why Photoshop does this, but I can't just go and choose an option that says delete all channels. It doesn't necessarily happen. We can do it if we select certain ones, okay? But we can't just say delete all channels except RGB. It doesn't really exist. So we have to hold down Shift, click every single one like that, and then hit delete. And that's a pain in the butt. So instead of that, what I've created is an action called Purge Portrait Mask Channels. When you tap that, it's going to say another warning similar to the original one of creating all these, that you might get delete not available or select not available. Just hit continue each time and it'll go through and delete every single channel for you. And then the end result is you have it cleaned out. Now, why would you want to delete the channels? You may not want to. you could just leave them in the channel bank available to you so you can have them whenever you want if you need to save the file. It just adds file size because it's pixel data, it's raster information, so it adds file size. You may care about that, you may not. It's just a good idea because normally when you export, you do an export function anyway, which strips out channels, and you can change color modes and color spaces and profiles, and it's not relevant to your export, but it's just going to make a slightly bigger file. If you're not used to that, just delete them out. That's why that function is there. Okay, cool. So I've got these available to me. I can choose a saturation mask anytime I want, highlight whenever I want, midtones whenever I want, and I can use the channels palette open to create additions. I'm just reviewing, guys. Hold down Command and Control and click on Skin Mask, hold down Command, Control, and Shift, and click on mouth, and now I've added a mouth to the skin mask. So again, there's curves. As you can see, remember, there's usually a perimeter, usually not a crisis unless you're making a very serious change, and you can modify everything except the eyes and the hair. Now, those are just demonstrations. What do we do if we want these intersect functions quicker, right? Instead of creating a layer, masking it, grouping it, and then masking the group. That's useful, don't get me wrong, and it can be very, very purposeful for lots of things, especially if you want multiple adjustment layers on one group, right? But we have helper actions. And all these helper actions exist to create these intersects, specifically intersects because they're a little harder to make, to create these intersects very, very quickly. And I know I said I was going to talk about the calculate advanced function first. We're going to do that at the end. Let's talk about these. Now, there's a lot of them, so you might think, oh, wow, what is all this? How can I work with all this? Just relax a second. Let me explain it. And also, I encourage you to delete actions, helper actions that you may not use, to clean up your actions palette. If you're never going to use, for example, I don't know, the hats. These are just AI hat selections. If you're never going to use them because you don't photograph hats, delete them. You don't need them. Just save your ATN file somewhere safe, of course. So with all these masks in place, these channels, all these helper actions activate instantly. Now, if you don't have these channels, the helper actions will fail. So you have to run this first. But once you run it, everything happens instantaneously. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Hit subject, I have the subject. Hit the skin, I have the skin. Background, I have the background. Sky, hair, okay? I have the eyes, I have the mouth. Hat will not work, so I'm not even going to bother hitting it, okay? But because there's no hat, obviously. But more important, we have our intersections. So what we have here, for example, subject saturation. Okay, that's like setting an adjustment layer with the subject mask and then grouping it and then masking the group with saturation, which is useful, don't get me wrong, but now we can just create it immediately. Hit subject saturation, boom. Now, if I go to vibrance and I look at that mask, hold down Option or Alt and click, I have the subject only masked out with saturation mask. Cool, that's pretty easy to understand. Okay, well, what about like skin highlights? Or skin midtones. How about skin midtones? You tap that, you immediately have the skin midtones. It uses the channels to create the calculation for the intersection. So now the skin midtones, I hit curves, and I have the skin masked out with curves. So now, any curves change I make will only affect the midtones. Be very cool for adding depth and all that. Keep in mind too, I'm just going to show you this real quick. I'm darkening. Let's say I want to darken to add some depth and contrast. This line over here is hard on the hairline, right? It doesn't quite work. Now, there's a lot of things we could do there, but don't forget, it's just a mask. So you can come in here with like white and a soft brush and clean up the hairline if you want. Nothing here is proprietary. You can make that look cleaner in any way that you want. But you created an intersect, which would take time to do manually. You've created an intersect quickly because this channel bank was created up front. So now you can create just the midtones of the skin just like that, right? So for example, remember I said we're going to change the color of the hair? Let's try it. So let's go to our hair. We have hair, saturation, highlights, midtones, and shadows. So let's go to the hair saturation. We're going to tap that. It's going to let us know no more than 50% is visible. This is just Photoshop, but it is active. So now if I go to hue and saturation, for example, hold down Option or Alt, click the mask just to look at it. That is a saturation mask of our hair, which we don't have in the channel bank, but by using the helper actions, it quickly calculates one. Okay, and we can calculate our own too, which I'll show you. So now, for example, if I increase the saturation and then I change the hue, let's go this direction, add a little bit of pink to it, right? I'm not trying to make it look subtle. I'm trying to make it look like colored hair. But instead of just shifting the hue of the hair entirely, we're shifting mostly just the saturated areas, which leaves the neutral areas looking somewhat neutral, off and on. You see how subtle that is and how fast it is? Someone says, hey, I want to change the hair color. You're thinking, oh boy, here we go. Well, hey, what did you ever think about using a hair selection, AI hair selection, and then blending that with a saturation mask? That's a pretty cool result. And you think, well, I want the highlights stronger. Cool, no problem. We have hair highlights. Tap that. Go to curves, and then we can brighten just the hair highlights. See that? Okay, let's look at that. Option or Alt and click the mask. There's our hair highlights. These are masks that don't exist in the channels, but are calculated instantly by the helper actions, right? So off and on. So we went from shot, not out of camera necessarily, it's completely edited and has some color correction in capture one, but now we have a pinkish hair with a little bit of highlight pop. How cool is that? We can even go further. We can say hair shadows, and then we can choose, let's go curves again, and now we can deepen the hair shadows if we want. You see what that mask looks like? That's the hair shadows from there to there. We can change the order. Sometimes this matters. You know, you may want to add the color on top. From there to there. Very subtle, very accurate mask that can really make things happen for us because we're intersecting different things. Okay, so that's hair, for example. Let's zoom in a little bit and let's talk about the eyes. So let's say we go to eyes saturation. Not a whole lot of color there, but let's try eyes highlights. Tap that. It's done immediately. Go to curves. Start brightening. Start darkening. I can brighten just the highlights of the eyes. See that? Including the specular shine bit and of course the sclera, the white parts of the eye. So we went from off and on. Quickly brighten the eyes just like that instantly. We can also say, for example, on the lips, where's our mouth? Mouth highlights. Cool. We hit that. I'm going to go to curves again, guys. You can use any adjustment layer. Brighten. And now look how I'm changing the specularity of the lips. Okay. So I went from off to on. Very subtle, but we did it instantly. Instantly, we're creating these intersected masks, right? So we have eye shadows. We can tap that. And then curves, for example, and we can darken the eye shadows. We can brighten the eye shadows if we want to soften them up a little bit without over brightening the iris or the sclera. See that? Instant selections automatically available to you with all these helper actions. Now, again, the wardrobe and accessories, you know, that mask didn't work out. Which I deleted. So we're not going to be able to call that, and that's okay. That's perfectly okay. These are instant intersect masks, okay? Very, very useful for so many different things, like I said. So we can even say, for example, subject saturation, okay, done. We can say subject highlights, could be very useful. Subject midtones, and then maybe we'll add, okay, we added a color lookup, so let's roll with that. Let's try one of these LUTs. I don't know. We have the midtones, and then we add a color. There you go. And we're only toning the midtones. If we hold down shift and temporarily click the mask to turn it off, we see that's the entire grade. But if we add it just to the midtones, it can look like that, which can be really, really cool. Okay. Now, what if you've created your own channel? What if you want to do some intersects a little bit more advanced? Well, that's why we have, close this up a little bit, we have this calculate advanced button, which at any moment, doesn't matter what you're doing, you can have a duplicate, you can have another adjustment layer, you can have a blank layer, doesn't matter. Just wherever you are, you can just be like, let's go to calculate and create our own intersect channel or intersect mask. Now, when you go to calculate, all it does is open up this calculations function, which is a Photoshop thing, but it has some defaults set up to it when it opens up so you can work quicker. So let's talk about that. Click on it. Now, calculations opens up. Let's walk you through this. The first source, of course, is going to be the image you have open. The second source is going to be the image you have open. We're not trying to work from image to image or file to file, which you can do here, but that's not what we're doing. Now, the layer, I have them both set to merged, and I have them both set to gray. See, merge gray, merge gray. This is just because it's the default way of getting started. The blending mode, I put it on multiply. Now, what does that do? Multiply in this scenario, when we're mixing and matching these channels, which are masks, when we're mixing and matching with multiply, multiply acts as an intersection calculation. And that's what allows us to create these intersections manually. Thusly, let's say we start with skin mask. Okay, cool. Now I want the saturation of the skin mask. There it is. The output or the result is selection. So if I hit OK, there we go. It's going to yell at me about the saturation, but I have that selection. Command D to get rid of it. Let's go back to calculate. Okay, I can say I want the skin mask and I want the highlights. There's the highlights. No. How about the midtones? Okay, I want the midtones. I want the shadows. Okay, I have the shadows, but what if I go to skin mask and I change it to mouth? Well, now I have the shadows of just the mouth. Okay, what if I want the midtones of just the mouth? That's cool. The highlights of just the mouth, or better yet, the saturation of just the mouth. So these are available in the helper actions, but you can build it here and get an idea of what it's looking like. So I can choose, okay, how about, and the order doesn't entirely matter, but I usually do like the area that I want to start with, and then the region or the range, I should say. So again, I might do subject, and then I can go saturation or highlights, or I can choose midtones to shadows, and then I can choose, let's say, eyes. That's the shadows of the eyes. I can choose the midtones of the eyes. I can choose the highlights of the eyes. You see how we can build this, and as long as the result is selection, we can do that. Now, if you build one of these, let's say you go to mouth and you choose midtones, and for some reason you need that one a lot, you can choose new channel and hit OK. And now it's going to live down here as its own alpha, and you can call it, you know, mouth mids. And you can have that available to you later on. And if you go back to calculate, you can mix and match with it for some reason if you want to. Okay, so you can always have that available to you, because when you go to the channels, there's mouth mids right there. This can get, I don't want to say complicated. I'm going to delete this one just to kind of not have it. I don't want to say it gets complicated in a bad way. I'm saying that being able to calculate your own channels or your own mask is very, very powerful. You can be like, I have all these available to me, so I'm going to go subject, I'm going to go, skin mask, and I want the midtones done, and I can see what it's going to look like. If I like that range, cool, I hit OK, and I have a selection and I keep rolling. Or I can choose one of the helpers, which does all the intersecting. As a reminder, adding and subtracting mostly can be done just with key commands on the channels window. But if you don't have the channels window open, you can, do this calculation manually if you want. I am simply scratching the surface on what's possible. Using calculate to create intersections is very, very useful. When you click the helper actions, that is in fact what it's doing. It's using calculations to create these preset helper ideas. So if you need, for example, hair midtones, you just tap it and you have hair midtones. And then you can come in here and choose, let's say color lookup. Why not? Let's throw a LUT on the hair midtones just for fun. We'll call this one Daydream. Let's see what it is. Very, very subtle. How about Desert Sun? Desert Film, I should say. Very, very subtle. But again, we're adding just to the hair midtones. At any moment, you can hit the helper actions and they'll do the calculations. But the calculation advanced function is available to you in case you want to do that on your own. Tap that, and then you can mix and match. And the reason why I say I'm just scratching the surface is that calculations, this function is really useful for so many things, and a lot of actions and panels that I've worked on over the years have used this or very, very similar. Now keep in mind here, we have the skin mask, we're merging it with the eyes mask, no match found, right? So you get nothing. There's your result, absolutely nothing, right? But if you were to change, for example, subject mask, and then choose eyes, well, all you get is the eyes. So you gotta think about that. Usually it's gonna be the region, the body part, if you will, and then the range. And you can do so many different things too. For example, let's say on my channels window, I can hit a brand new alpha channel. Now I have a brand new alpha channel. I'm just gonna call it grad, because sometimes this is very useful. You can take just the gradient of black to white, because it's a channel, right? And now we have a grad available to us, okay? So let's say we go back to calculate, and we say, I want the skin mask, and I want to intersect it with grad. Now I've created a gradient. And if I don't want it that direction, I hit invert. And I inverted the other direction, which is mostly being covered up because the mask ends. Okay, but as you can see, I've created a gradient. I can do a subject gradient. You never know if you need that. How about a background gradient? You can also invert that. Who knows what you can do with calculations when you have these channels available to you. But the simple idea of skin mask and then highlights, boom, now you have highlights of the skin, or you can take the midtones of the skin or the shadows of the skin, or you can say the mouth, I want the shadows of the mouth. So many different options. Quickly switch it to saturation of the mouth, hit OK. Now we have a selection. Of course, we're still on that channel, so we have to go back to RGB so we can see. Now we have the saturation of the mouth. If I go to vibrance and add a bunch of saturation, I can boost the saturation of the lips way too much, but you can see we're only boosting it in the saturated areas. So I know I've said a lot, but this is what I'm talking about when it comes to creating compound masks. We have all these beautiful helper actions which make all your intersections for you. If you leave the channels palette or window open, you can command or control click using shift and alter option to add and subtract, and you can mix and match back and forth. And of course, you can use calculate anytime you want to create these manually. At least with a pre-visualizer. And depending on how comfortable you are, you can definitely add more like this grad, etc. Now, speaking of all these channels, I mentioned earlier that they can make your file kind of bloat, and that's true. Okay, it can definitely get big. But just like when we created it, and it gives us a bunch of warnings, if I go purge portrait mask channels, it's going to say, hey, some other things may happen. Like I mentioned earlier, just hit continue. And as it goes through deleting them, select, delete, that's fine. They're all gone. It's designed to delete the channels that it creates. So your grad is still there, but you can quickly come down here to delete and delete the grad if you want to. Now, if you save your PSDs or PSBs and you have a bunch of channels and a bunch of layers and a bunch of other things, that's fine. You don't have to delete them, but you have the option to delete them in one go by pushing that button. Now, once the masks are gone, or the channels are gone, I should say, keep in mind, most of this won't work. However, if for some reason you need one thing back, you're like, oh shit, I didn't want to do that. I still want my skin channel. So you tap the skin channel. Doesn't matter where you are. Okay. It's going to give it a merge. It's going to put the merge version of the file on top, use those pixels to run Adobe AI and kind of process and figure out where the skin is. And then it's going to create a channel with the skin that then you can call as needed. And also keep in mind, you have the saturation channel that you can create. You have the highlights and midtones and shadows channels you can create. It depends on what you need. So obviously I'm recording. It's taking a little bit of time, and who knows what the Adobe servers are doing when it comes to AI. So sometimes the skin selection alone can be your longest process. I'm talking through it right now to kind of show you. I'm also recording, so it's a little slower, but there's a skin mask. And I can come in here and it's like, you know what? I want a highlights channel. Let that be created. I want a midtones channel. I want a shadows channel, and I want a saturation channel. Cool. And now I'm back in business, because if I click calculate advanced, I can get right back to work. I can say, give me a skin and give me the saturation. Boom. Now I've got saturation to the skin, hit OK, and I've got a selection. It's going to yell at me. I've got a selection. Beautiful. I can create the channels that I need if I know I need them, right? And I only have these 5. Keep that in mind too. So if you like, oh no, I got rid of all my channels, well, you can create the ones that you need. Now I'm going to hold down, click on this one, hold down shift, click, 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 and delete them all. You can also run the action as well. It's just going to tell you that a bunch of them aren't found. This is the nature of Photoshop channels, which are great places to have a repository of different masks. Like I said, just a little clunky when it comes to managing them, unless you don't care about file size. In that case, if file size isn't an issue, go for it. But when these helper actions, most of these actions are going to work with the existing channels in place. But once you run it, whether it takes 30 seconds or 90 seconds, once you run that first action that creates the bank of channels, everything happens fast, literally instantly, as you're building added, subtracted, or intersected masks, which are so useful. Now, I know it's a lot, like I said, so please leave a comment below. If you have any questions, drop me an email, nbp@ninobatista.com. All I've done is taken a bunch of my zombie actions, like I said before, that I've had over the years. I just do specific things, and I've organized them. I've added new ones. I've made them a little easier to understand, and I created a set of tools, a suite of actions to manage compound selections quickly. You can install what you want or don't want. You can delete actions you're not using, keep it as streamlined as you need it to be. But by having a bank of channels up front, you can mix and match, add, subtract, and intersect, and create perfect selections. This is what we retouchers do with some regularity. And now I've created a set of tools that I think really helps without any plugins or third-party windows or anything to install. It just uses Photoshop tools, but it makes total sense, at least to me. But I know it's complicated, or it can be, especially if you're new to channels. So drop me a question below.